Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail dream. Have you ever dreamt of hiking the AT? Bruce Matson did, so we're going to follow him every step of the way. Hi everybody, and welcome back to a very special edition of Returning to Katahdin, sponsored by Trailtopia. Now I say that this is a very special edition, and it isn't just because we haven't got Bruce on the show. No, this week's guest is Suzanne Dixon, the very recently appointed President and CEO of the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. And in case you didn't know it, or perhaps you need to be reminded from time to time, the ATC is the organisation whose sole purpose is to make your experience on the AT better. That's it. That's what they do. It's an extraordinary bunch of like-minded people with a pure mission, and Suzanne is their leader in this goal. We'll be hearing from Suzanne in a moment, but before we get to her, let's get stuck into a scrummy dessert. Do you remember those days on the trail when you really need to treat yourself? You know, those days when you fall in the mud or the rain starts running down your neck, the rocks are driving you crazy, or even when you're just fed up. You need a boost, and when that happens, stop hiking, take off your pack, and treat yourself to one of Trailtopia's scrumptious desserts. Why not go for Rocky Road pudding, a rich chocolate pudding loaded with mini marshmallows and toasted slivered almonds. By the time you get that into your system, you'll be warm, toasty, and satisfied. Try Trailtopia Adventure Food, the best of home cooking away from home. So, the ATC. A lot of us remember the ATC as the place where we stop for an hour to get our pictures taken in Harper's Ferry and then be intimidated by the huge 3D mock-up of the trail in their offices. I can recall so clearly running my finger across how far I'd already hiked, and then I did the same with the balance of my hike. It looked so intimidating. But they're not just a shop with a photo booth and a big 3D map, as you're about to learn, as we meet the very charming Suzanne Dixon. Okay, I'd like to introduce Suzanne Dixon, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. Hi, Suzanne, how are you?
I'm great, Steve. How are you doing?
Well, I'm fine, thank you. And thanks for speaking with us on a Sunday afternoon, on a Super Bowl Sunday afternoon, no less. And I obviously want to speak to you about the ATC, but I'd love to know a little bit about your background first. Did you have any hiking or outdoors background to bring to your new role, replacing Ron Tipton as President and CEO of the ATC?
I do. I do have a hiking and outdoors background that I bring to this new role here at ATC, but I also bring a conservation background and experience, which is what ATC was looking for in their next CEO. So not just the hiking experience, but complementing the conservation organization that we are.
So has this been your life over the years? Are you verging more towards conservation than hiking, or have you just always been an outdoors person?
I've always been an outdoors person. I actually grew up in Ireland and spent many days and summers with my family, either camping or just being outdoors. And the mountains in Ireland are down the river. So I am excited, actually thrilled to be the next CEO here at ATC. And my prior role coming to ATC, I was the Senior Director for Regional Operations at the National Parks Conservation Association, a position I held for a long time. And there my role was developing national campaigns, establishing bipartisan relationships at the federal, state, and local levels, built regional operations, conducted media relations, those kinds of interests. And so this opportunity to lead the ATC for me, I knew it would not only be challenging and rewarding, but would also allow me to leverage my varied skills to have a broader impact on the places that we care about. So I'm thrilled to be the next leader.
When the opportunity came up and ATC were looking, I think Ron was retiring at the time, what made you actually want to be part of its future? Do you see a different future than is currently set out, or did you see it extend your conservation role?
One of the things, actually there were several key attributes that made it specifically attractive to me beyond its mission. The membership group aspect that brings together and deploys citizens and organizations and government entities across the federal, state, and local levels. It affects change and advocates for specific goals across numerous communities, all tied together by one national park. But it also promotes and welcomes all trail users and enthusiasts, and it makes the AT an ideal recreational opportunity for all Americans. So I think it was all of those combined, really, that excited me about my skill set at my last job, and then coming in here and building upon that. I think those were the key ingredients to me taking this role.
Well, I don't want to pry too much into your interview because you probably won't tell me anyway. But were they looking for a particular vision, and did you articulate that vision in terms of conservation that they were hoping to hear? Do you think?
I think so. I think when you look at their strategic plan and you think about broader relevancy and engaged partners and effective stewardship, I think that that's a skill set that I brought from my prior background and just coming from a national organization. You think about the AT, it's a world-renowned footpath, and I think about all the different roles that ATC plays and how unique the organization is, and working with volunteers and trail clubs. And I think sort of my background lends a real great opportunity to expand upon what's already been done at ATC through Ron Tipton's leadership. And sort of this is the next iteration as we approach being 100 years old in 2025.
Wow. 100 years old. How about that?
That's right.
So you've been there literally only a few weeks, haven't you?
I'm on my 7th week, but who's counting, Steve?
Well, I'm counting, because is it as you expected it was? Is it as you expected it was going to be, or have you seen things that you weren't expecting there in good and bad ways? I guess, because I know when I started new jobs when I first came to America, the job that I was offered the American job in the UK. And the job that I came to was nothing like they talked to me about. So, is it as you imagined it would be when you were pitched for the job in the first place?
I'm going to go with yes and no on that one. I think it's definitely a complicated landscape. And I say that from a landscape perspective in terms of people and land. Some of our strengths, I think, were pretty obvious coming in. The volunteer engagement, passionate, dedicated staff and board, the AT maintaining clubs. And then I think about some of the opportunities that I see since being here and over the past 7 weeks. And I look at the partnerships with like organizations that we could build upon, and working with our AT users and visitors to be thinking about how do we engage them to become members and donors, and then leveraging our AT communities and really giving back to those communities and realizing the value of what they have in their backyard. But how do we augment that? I mean, I think about entrepreneurial opportunities for those communities, the visitation that comes to their backyard. They're staying in their local B&Bs and hotels and eating out in their restaurants. And how can we have those communities become an advocate for the trail and beyond their community with their members of Congress or on Capitol Hill? So I think about those kinds of opportunities. So I'm going to say, I mean, it's been really, I've been so welcomed here at ATC, both internally and externally. And so far, I'm enjoying this journey.
Well, it's only 7 weeks, and I'm glad you are. It's obviously good news you are enjoying it. I must say, as a hiker, when I hiked the AT myself, I found, and it was very striking to me, that some of the little trail towns were so welcoming to hikers. Not all, but pretty much most trail towns were welcoming to hikers, and the people who lived in the towns would always pick you up when you were trying to hitch a lift, and it was almost if they welcomed you because they knew you were going to spend money in their businesses, which is a good thing, I think, for everybody. It's
phenomenal. And I think that's one of the greatest things that our public lands give back to communities is the millions of people that visit our national parks each year is over 330 million. And how do we tap into that from a community perspective? And at the same time, how do we leverage those communities to help us better protect and manage the trail?
Well, as somebody, we'll talk about the ATC itself now, and somebody who's done a few 5-year plans in my time, I know that the ATC is partway through a 5-year plan. Are there highlights, and is it working out as it was expected to work out, or has it been, as these things often are, altered year by year?
So in my 7 weeks, I'm going to give you a few highlights. I think we're in that assessment stage of 3+ years in. How well have we done? Are we still on the right path? Should we change anything out? But we've done a really great job, I think, as an organization. When you think about effective stewardship, and the goal there was to lead a public-private partnership for managing the AT treadway and the corridor lands.
Yeah.
And we've done things like help to successfully preserve large landscapes of at-risk landscapes. So one of those, for example, would be the White Cat Mountain in Maine.
Yeah.
And then I think about proactive protection, and I think, okay, ATC and the Park Service continued to advance the work of the AT Landscape Partnership in 2017. So last year, members of the partnership, which secured 11 projects along the AT,
Wow.
These projects conserve more than 5,000 acres, important to the trail and the AT experience. And so a diversity of funding sources allowed for these acquisitions to be completed. So that's a big success for ATC. And our focus in 2018 is to build a more comprehensive and active communication system that amplifies the work of ATC and our AT landscape partners. And there's a coalition that is a part of that entire endeavor. Broader relevancy, another strategic priority for us. And I'll talk about the Conservation Leadership Corps.
Sure.
This is a career pathway for young adults, 18 to 25 years of age, and they're looking for a job in the environmental sector. And last year we wrapped up, I believe, the second cohort of 9 core members, which recruited through a partnership with Groundwork USA and the Conservation Trust of North Carolina. They received job skills training and experience necessary to compete for roles with conservation organizations or public agencies. And this past year, members started out with natural resource work in the Great Smokies. And then they traveled to, the Southwest Virginia for the Leave No Trace training and trail construction with our really relevant Connerock crew that continued on to Harpers Ferry for more trail building and public education, interpretation experience. So I can't wait to see what's next for these talented and passionate young AT stewards.
Getting young people involved is important, isn't it? It's going to be critical for the future of the ATs. One of the things I spoke with Bob Peebles last year at Trail Days, and he said that the trail maintainer crews are getting older and older and older.
That's exactly it. And ATC, I think, has the roadmap for how we can help our trail clubs really manage for the future. Our outreach efforts have opened up new ways to really manage that trail. And the Connerock crew is in its 35th year, and this past year engaged about 175 participants in managing the trail. And through that, I believe 30 to 40% of them were young adults. So we really do have a roadmap there, I think, that can help the trail clubs, and that's something that we really want to tap into for 2018. We do need that next generation, both from a management perspective of the trail, but also for the protecting and preservation of our trail to become advocates.
Yeah, sure. Now, on a similar sort of subject, but related to it, I guess, is one of the issues that I discussed with Ron in the interview that we did last year was the huge lack of diversity within the hiking community. And I did ask him, and he gave me an answer at the time, how are ATC facing the challenge of making the trail, in fact, any other trail, more attractive to this changing demographic that we've got in America?
It's a great relevant question that us and many other organizations struggle with. Again, I think one of the Connerock crew, which tackled 11 major trail relocation and rehab projects along the AT from Georgia through Central Virginia. We also hire seasonal ridge runners, providing on-trail education for Leave No Trace. And this hiring offers entry-level job opportunities for youth. Those are really big components for making that work. And then we have a Next Generation Advisory Council. And you may ask, what is that? The next generation, they seek to achieve our goal of broader relevancy. So we're increasing youth and diversity in order to address the reality that America's growing diverse population is underrepresented in many conservation organizations. This council consists of those young, diverse leaders working to address those barriers to employment and recreation. They're also creating a more inclusive narrative of people utilizing the AT and contributing advice to us as an organization on programs and policies designed to encourage membership, advocacy, and leadership from a younger and more culturally diverse population. We've got to engage them in our work. I like to say we have to educate them about why they should care and then engage them in the work that we do as an organization. And then they're going to be empowered to go back to their networks and their communities and their core day-to-day friends and say, this is important. We are the future of protecting the AT, and give them those opportunities to become more involved. But I really do see ATC as a leader there. It's been 3+ years now in the goal of broader relevancy, but the next generation is key to the success of ATC in recruiting that next generation.
Yeah.
The other thing, Steve, quickly I would add is the Maine Youth Trail Stewardship Coalition, which started off last year with the Trails Skills Summit in Maine. And even though the weather apparently was frigid, that these party participants learned about rigging and trail design and tool maintenance. So I say, if you're looking to learn those kinds of skill sets, you got to come on out and partner with ATC. We'll make sure definitely that everybody avoids frostbite. We are talking Maine in the early part of the year, but
nice.
Hey, who doesn't want to do that?
Me.
I think, Steve, I'm not challenge you to do that with me.
I'm not the young demographic you're aiming for, trust me.
But we have to be the leaders in recruiting and being out there with them.
The recruiting, the reason I asked the question is because the AT will only remain relevant in America if it reflects America, and currently it doesn't, so it needs to reflect America, and hopefully this work that you're doing on diversity will really be part of it. And you need, as you say, you need people to go back to their own communities and get their fellow diverse community back out on the trail and come in either work on it or just a hike on it. I literally saw one African American person on the trail in 2014 in 6 months, just one. Extraordinary. I was shocked at how few blacks and Latinos there were out there. So it's certainly a mission that needs to be done to keep it relevant for the rest of the country.
And I think part of that is really looking at how far away from the AT are we connecting to those communities. Yeah. While we love through hikers and section hikers, we have to find ways to engage those families that live an hour or two away from the trail who are only going to come and hike 1 or 2 miles and maybe sit down and have a picnic. And how do we educate them about the importance of this is in your backyard? So there's an education piece for sure that we have a role in playing.
Yeah. Now, we plan to interview you. I looked up your mission statement, always a good place to find out what you actually do. And you've got a very simple message. Your mission statement is very simple, to preserve and manage the ATC. But what does that actually encompass, and how extensive is the reach of the ATC to achieve that mission? Because that's a big, wide goal. With only a few words, that's a big goal.
It's massive, and I would say that our mission encompasses every aspect of the AT experience. Everything from maintaining the footpath to advocating against incompatible developments for better protections, to also managing visitation to better protect each visitor's ability to enjoy that unique AT experience. You know, we are the leading organization in all of these endeavors as we coordinate with all partners to ensure those goals are implemented and achieved. But again, I would say it's our role is educating, it's protecting, and it's empowering. And it's empowering all of our partners, from the Park Service to the Forest Service to our trail clubs to our volunteers, to that next generation. It's a simple mission, but we cannot do it by ourselves. That's why I say to everybody, we are on this journey together. Everybody we meet, I believe, has a role to play. The question that you have to ask yourself is, how do you fit in and what is your role?
Yeah, very cool. And I'm sure actually when you came to ATC, you brought some of your own vision on how we should look at our outdoor spaces. Can you share some of that with our listeners? Because that may not be, people know that's pretty much the ATC job is to preserve and manage, but you must have had your own vision because you've worked in the environment before. So can you share some of that?
I did, and I will. For me, it's about communities. The work that I did prior to ATC really was in communities and getting those communities to realize the importance of having a national park unit in your backyard. The connection that you can make to that is one being just quality of life. Yeah. From an economics perspective, it's the tourism dollars that come into your community. It's the entrepreneurial factor that you can bring. And in the end, it's all of us working together who are going to be able to protect and manage that trail. I always ask myself when I'm sitting around a table trying to move something forward, in particular now for ATC, I ask who's not at the table, because there's always someone who's not at that table. So for me, that's one of the things I am most going to love about this job is all the different community partners that we get to work with. It's empowering the youth. I worked in a couple of projects related to broader relevancy, one being in Brownsville, Texas, where it's a 94% Latino community. And they had a park in their backyard, Palo Alto National Battlefield. And Steve, they had no idea. They would drive by it every day. They didn't realize that behind that cannon, in front of that park, was this incredible story of the U.S.-Mexican War.
Yeah.
And so we were brought in to educate the community about what's in their backyard. So for me, it's about what is the nature, heritage, ecotourism? How do all of those things benefit your community? And it's economics, it's quality of life, it's conservation. And so that's the skill set that I bring here to the AT.
Can I interrupt you on that? Did you have an impact? Did you find that more, once you pointed out to them what was it on their doorstep, did you get more visitors from that community to the park?
We did. We ended up starting a teen council, 13 to 18-year-olds. And then after about 12 months, that community not only became a real advocate for that national park, they went from not knowing it was in their backyard to reaching out to me to educate their member of Congress about deferred maintenance, asking for more funding for the National Park Service. So they went from not knowing to becoming an advocate, and that's that if you educate and engage and empower them, they will realize the value of having something like Palo Alto in their backyard, or in this case, the AT in their backyard.
Well, I think the youth are critical because the 13 to 18-year-old, the teenagers, they're definitely the ones because the parents are still interested in them at that stage. So they'll draw their parents. Right. They'll draw their parents into
voting.
It. Yeah, they'll draw their parents into it, which is great. I think it makes a lot of sense.
They will be voting next go around.
Yeah, and talking about voting, is government an impediment or a partner in terms of accomplishing the mission? I mean, I'm not trying to be political at all. It's just there is a needle to be threaded between economics and public good, and there isn't always threaded the way in which we would like necessarily. Do you find it a frustrating thing to deal with government? That's on either side. That's on either side. That's on either side, by the way, either left or right.
No, and I think I don't actually. I do feel like the National Park System is one of the most phenomenal programs within the federal government. I think that the unique story that ATC plays is that public-private partnership with the federal government. We are a non-partisan organization, and I think that's what's so special about the AT. Yeah. But we wouldn't be able to do this without our close relationship with the Park Service and the skill set and the expertise that they bring. And so we're always encouraging an open dialogue. We want what's best for the AT. We also see that the Park Service, and in particular, you saw this throughout the government shutdown this past year, I guess in early January, we didn't shut the national parks down because they are integral to communities. Yeah. And so I think that the opportunity to continue to partner with the Park Service and the Forest Service and those federal agencies in protecting the landscape, in interpreting the landscape is very, very important for us as we move forward. I will say that the AT is the model for how public and private can work together. So I think it's definitely not an impediment and a definite partner in accomplishing our work moving forward.
You must be the first person who ever felt that way. A government impediment partner.
Great working relationship. It's funny. I come from a history of having just great partners within the federal government protecting the park. And so I come from a very good, long history of having great relationships with the federal government in doing that. So I'm taking that with me and running with it.
I'm only teasing you a bit there. Now, try to look ahead. Let's try to look ahead, say 10 years. You're still fairly young, so on the assumption that you're still leading the way, what are you hoping to see in that 10 years' time, in the year 2028?
Wow, that's a great question. Okay, well, we'll be 103 years old.
Woohoo!
I'm going to hope that the AT is seen as one of the most significant landscapes in the eastern United States, that it is every bit as important as the iconic western landscape, that we are the leading organization protecting and managing the trail, that we have an incredible on-the-ground presence, policy expertise, extensive partnerships, that have put us in the leading position to mobilize citizens and communities, that we've engaged them in civic actions, we've secured outcomes, we've protected, we've enhanced the AT for that next generation. And a big part of that for me is going to be the next generation. So I think about a clear theory of change, and I think about what that means for me around next generation. And I think if we can get people out playing on the trail, learning on the trail, serving on the trail, advocating for the trail, then we, ATC, could and should and can create a national movement. So a series of contiguous and meaningful trail experiences, to me, cultivates effective lifelong advocates for the trail and the landscapes that it passes through. So that's one big component for me that I feel like by 2028, we should have turned a massive corner and are really leading the way for the rest of the country in how to engage that next generation. That's one big piece for me. The other, I think, would be protecting the AT experience. And that to me is, yes, it's the landscape. It's also the link between trail stewardship and broader stewardship. So how do we think about trails in the context of the restoration, the economy in those 14 states? So I hope that we've been able to prove that we've centered a lot of our work on reforestation, land reclamation, clean energy repowering, and we've asked ourselves and answered, how does the trail system fit into or connect with these economic opportunities? And that we have demonstrated the trail's economic benefits. Because I think we can bring so many people to the table once we can demonstrate the economic benefit of the AT.
There's some lofty goals there, I tell you. Mind you got 10 years to do it, so you should be okay. So you better get started now then. Now you've actually mentioned them earlier on. We've heard for years that the AT has got one of the largest volunteer forces anywhere in the world. So with all this free labour, I would imagine that Bruce's hoped for contribution of $250,000 it's going to be quite a boost for the Conservancy. Can you give us some of the ways in which this money would help?
Absolutely, and I cannot thank Bruce enough for his investment in what he is doing for ATC. And not only is he giving up his time to educate and hike the AT, but he's also giving up his money and challenging his friends and families and those that may not even know him today to contribute. It's historic, his contribution, and it will support our mission to protect and manage the AT. It's going to really help us in a myriad of ways. Everything from addressing infrastructure needs, supporting major land protection projects, which are vital with our ever-growing threats to the trail and surrounding areas. His investment is also so significant because he's one of our 4 ambassadors kicking off our new peer-to-peer fundraising initiative.
Right.
So now anyone who loves the trail can help us raise funds to protect and manage the AT by creating their own AT fundraising page. But Bruce has been literally a trailblazer in this effort for us and is going to raise the profile of ATC, raise the profile of the AT, and just tell our story in a very unique and different way. And so I can't thank him enough from our staff and from our board for what he's doing for ATC.
I'm so excited about it. And you saying that is just so lovely. I mean, he'll be the first to say this is something he's wanted to do for years and years and years, but he really thought about how he could do this, and contributing to the ATC was really important to him. He doesn't say much about it. He's a very, very modest man, and he's I've seen his resume. Trust me, he's done a bit in his life, and I'm so proud that we've been able to put these shows together just to show everybody what Bruce is like, and also shine a light on the ATC and how he wants to really help them. So I'm delighted for that. So if there was just one thought you'd like to leave our listeners with, if they're considering a donation, what would that be?
Wow, I'm going to say that their donation will help ATC do what we do best. And I'm going to sum it up as educate, protect, and empower. We prepare and educate visitors as they explore the wonders of the trail, which is what Bruce is doing. We promote outdoor ethics to minimize our impact on the environment, and we engage our supporters on issues important to the AT experience. So I just gave you 3 thoughts, but I think that summarizes what Bruce is going to do for ATC and what his impact is going to be having for us as an organization. And I hope that he is an inspiration to all of your listeners to, if not through hike or section hike, get out there on the AT and just disconnect from their busy lives.
That is really nice for people to think about, and that their donation, however small, is going to be helpful to achieve all the goals you've set out. And I really appreciate you talking with us about it. One little treat, by the way, just so you know, you and I are going to meet the week after next, I think it is, on the Friday for Bruce's goodbye party. He has promised to wear his kilt that he's going to be wearing on the trail. So I feel that we need to look out for that, and we need to get a picture of the three of us with Bruce in his kilt, don't you? And we should put that on the show notes.
Oh my goodness, we're doing it, and we're holding into that for sure, Steve.
Oh dear. Well, thanks so much for taking the time out on a Sunday afternoon, and I really appreciate you talking with us.
Thank you, Steve. Take care of yourself.
No worries. Bye.
Bye-bye.
As I was when I interviewed the previous incumbent of that position, Ron Tipton, I was immediately aware when speaking with Suzanne that the ATC has somebody special at their helm. She has a strong environmental background, a clear vision for the future, and inclusive policies for a younger, more diverse demographic. In my view, that last part is probably the most important part. I was a little wary of asking about her interactions with the federal government, because we all know how well those conversations can go sometimes. Yet her response was very reassuring. I'm also glad that I asked her that question about the future. She gave me such a thoughtful answer, linking the trail to the economics of the towns within spitting distance of the trail. Oh, by the way, spitting distance in the UK means nearby. I hope it means the same here. And what about Bruce? He's a trailblazer. Who'd have thought? Not only is he a trailblazer, he's historic. I think being a trailblazer is pretty darn good. I'm not too sure about being historic. I hope that you'll consider donating to his cause. Remember, just click on the link in the show notes and you'll be taken directly to his donate page. One last thing. As I mentioned before, our sponsors, Trailtopia, have so generously agreed to fund us for the next 6 months, and I wondered if I could ask you a favour. Pop into your local REI and ask for a Trailtopia meal. You don't even need to buy a meal because they're not there. Just asking will help our friends get further recognition and get them into the store. I appreciate all of you who have already said kind words about and bought Trailtopia food. Next week will be the last weekend before Bruce actually passes under the archway at Amicalola Falls and heads up to the top of Springer with Cheryl, his wife. I'm going to be travelling to Virginia to be master of ceremonies, no less, at his farewell bash. In his kilt, of course, and I'll be sitting down with him for our last face-to-face before the big day. Bruce and I will see you next week.